You are listening to Conversations on the Way. I'm your host, Nana Jumphy, and I'm looking forward to sharing conversations at the various intersections of liberation for the people and the planet with you. Thank you for being here with us. Today's conversation is at the intersection of imperialist hegemony and systemic complicity. We continue the conversation on the siege and genocide in Gaza by being in conversation with Dr. Jared Ball. Jared Ball is a professor of communication and Africana studies at Morgan State University in Baltimore, Maryland. He's also the author of The Myth and Propaganda of Black Buying Power. My goal today is to raise $1,500, and I know that you can help me reach that goal. KPFK doesn't happen without your continuing support. This is my invitation to you to become a sustaining member or to donate just $25 per month helps ensure that as a sustainer, you keep KPFK on the air. 818-985-5735, 818-985-5735, 818-985-5735, or kpfk.org. If you go on our website at kpfk.org, you can also pick up a gift of appreciation for your donation. A mug, a bumper sticker, one of those t-shirts. Get yours today. Thank you for joining us, Brother Jared. Welcome to Conversations on the Way.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So, as Zionist Israel, its government, continues to bomb and kill and starve and injure and violate Palestinians in Gaza, really in an open genocide, meaning that it's been happening, but we're seeing it in this really in-your-face way right now. You know, do you think that at this point we're in a space where conditions are ripe, which sounds wild to say in this moment, for people to really see what the heck is in that region, like for people to really see what Israel is doing and for us to be able to apply the kind of pressure that we applied against apartheid South Africa, for example? What's your sense of that?
I would like to think that that's the case, but and admittedly, you know, obviously things are new, and I haven't had a chance to conduct any of my own research or to find or to see anyone else with the time and space to conduct new research to address this specific point. But I think that what we're seeing today is a challenge to that possibility in the sense that the media coverage and the amount of propaganda that is being delivered and applied to this particular uprising, I think is at least attempting. We'll have to see how successful it is to prevent that Israel Zionists, Israeli supporters or Israel supporters know that they have a PR problem. They've long understood they have a public relations problem, as most of the world is pretty clear that the occupation is unjust and Palestinians are a colonized, oppressed people, undeservedly so. And so Israel and its allies realize that they have this PR concern and have spent a good amount of resources and dedicated themselves over a good amount of time, along again with their U.S. and other allies, in presenting messaging that condemns criticism of Israel in general, condemns even the use of the word Zionism and an analysis of its politics. And in this moment is, I think, again, it's hard to assess its effectiveness, but I think they're doing, it seems that they're doing an incredible job from their perspective of promoting at minimum that, or I should say it in differently, at most they're allowing for some consideration of a quote unquote both sides analysis. But in terms of an actual critique or condemnation, certainly, of Israel's occupation or the levels of violence that it is enacting and then certainly calling for, has been prevented and condemned in ways that I'm not sure we've seen before. The willingness of UN officials to even refuse to call for a ceasefire, the levels of brutality and support from the U.S. president and elsewhere in defending, and even as Biden did, comparing Hamas's uprising to Nazis and the Second World War Holocaust of Jews and others. We're seeing a new level. Even seeing former NBA stars like Amari Stoudemire come out so vociferously and with hostility condemning Black people and other Black Lives Matter supporters for not supporting Israel in this moment of crisis. In other words, it feels like there has been a new level of propaganda waged in defense of Israel that is at least designed, and again, we'll have to see to what extent it's effective, to prevent that kind of comparison from taking hold, where the world would see Israel as it once saw South Africa in its application of apartheid there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I've been thinking, and thank you for that, because I've really been trying to figure out what is the missing thing in the offensive, right? So as folks on that listen to the show know, I practice capoeira Angola. I ain't gonna pretend I'm still rolling over the ground, Jared. I tried to do a cartwheel. I fell in a heap. Tried to join a horse. I'm not going to try to act like that's what I'm doing this moment. But the principles remain, right? And so it's like defense, offense, defense, offense. Okay, I do feel like there's a lot of defense that people have been on with such, with that vociferous media, and not just. I mean, people are getting doxxed. People are getting jobs yanked from them. People are getting job offers yanked from them. Like people are feeling that pressure, that intimidation that we know is part of what happens when you dare to struggle, dare to win. And so people are feeling that. And I'm thinking, okay, so people are being very defensive to some degree. Of course, you have folks that are on the offense and, in terms of their voice in the streets, et cetera. But what that thing, and this is going to be corny as heck, but I was thinking to myself, like, where is I ain't city, right? Or like the we are the world, like, where is the thing, especially on the cultural end, that can push back against this media part? Because often that is what happens. It's the culture that has that kind of power. What are your thoughts about that?
I see more of the opposite, where we saw, in fact, I just saw a reporting of a right wing white supremacist version of "We Are the World," encouraging more defense of U.S. boundaries against immigrants and defending against godless attacks on Christianity and all this other kind of stuff. And we've watched, or we've been suppressed beneath a new wave over the last few years and really decades of a colonized industry taking over and being able with greater degrees to promote apolitical and anti-Black, anti-woman forms of pop culture, depoliticizing that space so well that it's less likely that we would see something of that order today. What we get or more likely to see are the kinds of empty, celebrity-driven promotional campaigns like what we saw during COVID, where the silly, in a quite silly way, celebrities were singing, what was it, John Lennon songs or something like that in an attempt to make us feel better. That's what I would feel like we would be more likely to get that kind of. We're really in a difficult era. I mean, again, the most prominent, particularly Black spokespeople and pundits are at best slightly liberal Democrats, and at worst, reactionaries. An actual Black left analysis is almost impossible to get to outside of spaces like this and other sort of so-called alternatives. But all of that exists suppressed beneath, and again, an increasingly sophisticated propagandized environment that makes critical analysis and certainly radical responses very difficult to develop and to see the light of day. So I am not in my most optimistic moments in terms of our ability to develop interpretations and frames that will resist these imposed narratives. And it's going to take increasing efforts on our part and support for, again, platforms like yours and others to say, to create spaces where other ideas can be heard. I mean, because again, I can't help but go back to that initial point I was trying to make a moment ago, that for those of us, I mean, we've been watching this for a long time, and even as long as this conflict has been going on, I can't remember a time where there was this level of overt calls for the extermination of Palestinians with almost no pushback. That we would see a UN not even call for a ceasefire, and we would see US presidents increasing shipments of armaments to Israel with sort of a blank check in terms of their use against a civilian population. I mean, so yeah, I'm sorry for the circular response, but I just don't see where out of, and then a lot of my own work in particular is focused on media targeting Black audiences and its messaging around race, class, and economics. And we have an entire Black targeting media ecosphere that is clearly been designed to, again, negate the work that you and I and others in these spaces have been trying to do, and creating this layer of nominally, symbolically Black media that encourages the a complete upside down and non-analytical approach to the world, all in favor of symbolism and Black capitalism and the like. So we're in a difficult moment. Where we're going to see that response, I don't know, but I'm happily waiting for it to emerge, and I'll support it as best I can.
It's not circular. I mean, this is really the situation. I was thinking back again to and agreeing totally with what you're saying in terms of just the 2 points, the lack of response in this way, or the Israel supporting a response, because lack of response is one horrible part, but just the full-throated support of Israel and the changing of building signs and the lights and all that is something that I also think, at least in my lifetime, and I tell people all the time, I'm old as dirt and twice as funky, that haven't seen in decades. Maybe when I was a little kid, I don't remember it. And then I would say, in terms of Black folks, like I remember a time when the solidarity between Black people and the Palestinian liberation movement was so tight that if someone did a hijacking of Pan Am, they let us off the plane. Do you remember that, Jared?
Mm-hmm.
They were clear, like, you Black folks, you don't even have to say, I'm with you. We know you're with us. Get off the plane.
And there was even that famous Chappelle joke where he made reference to indirectly to that kind of history when he told the joke of when so-called terrorists would take over a plane, they would know not to take Black people hostage because they knew there was no currency for it. So they knew implicitly Black people were not going to be part of the project or part of the shouldn't be part of the target population. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah.
But after decades of us being, the ones that are paratrooping in and who and what, and then just we clearly don't have that same kind of cachet, if you would call it that, right? And I'm thinking of this broader Black diaspora. I mean, Israel was almost admitted as an observer nation to the African Union. That did not happen, which, mind boggling to me, because I just remember us as African people being a lot clearer about what was happening in Palestine and just staunchly in support of Palestinian liberation. And I see, whether it be countries, I see this religious piece where you have Black folks, again, not just in the United States, but globally, who are like, we're Christian, therefore somehow we are for the Jews, and that means that we are for Israel. Just a lot of splintering off that is happening that I would not, if you had asked, the 20-year-old Nana, would we be in this position in terms of a Black understanding of our connections between Black liberation movements, the Palestinian liberation movement, oppression of Black people, oppression of Palestinian people? I would have told you no. I mean, as far as I was concerned, that was pretty solid. But as you've pointed out, it seems that that is not the case.
No, I mean, so first of all, the only way I really know how to respond to that point is, in addition to saying that you're correct, is that this has been a developed reaction, or this has been a consciously encouraged political conclusion for Black people to reach. In other words, in a variety of ways. There has been direct, certainly public relations or psychological warfare or propaganda or messaging since at minimum the 1970s, encouraging that Black power be redefined as Richard Nixon wanted it to be, as Black capitalism, as mainstream involvement in electoral politics and business development, but away from radical solidarity with Palestinians and other anti-colonial movements and struggles, without being defined, that is, as Black power is being defined along lines of Pan-Africanism and socialism. So that there has been this broader project for quite a while to redefine Black liberation along the lines of mainstream middle-class white American capitalist values and views. So in addition to that, with the targeted assassination, exile, and political imprisonment of people to this day, and I just got word as we were talking that not Russell Maroon Schultz, another political prisoner who was left to rot and die slightly after being released from prison, but Rochelle McGee is the word just has come out that Rochelle McGee, the longest held political prisoner in the United States, who had just been released a few weeks ago, has made his transition. But he was reflective of but McGee was reflective of a movement of radical solidarity with so-called third world peoples, of anti-capitalist, anti-colonial struggle, and that's one of the reasons why he was basically left to rot until his just before his death in prison, even as his one-time co-defendant or somewhat co-defendant Angela Davis has had a very different level of reaction and interaction with society since they were initially to be tried together. So my point is that McGee is reflective of a history that still sees Assata Shakur in exile, that still sees Mimi Abu Jamal in prison, Leonard Peltier in prison, and others who and comes out of it. We're talking about a time after where all the assassinations that we're already familiar with, from King to Malcolm to Fred Hampton, Walter Rodney, and others outside the country. I mean, there's so many to name, but the point is, after all of that, we are left with an encouraged punditry class, Black journalist class, Black academic class of folks who consciously or unconsciously are aware that there's no life, there's no material uplift, there's no come up, as is said, in defending these politics and defending the traditions of radical solidarity with similarly oppressed peoples around the world. So what that, and then of course through very sophisticated efforts to quote unquote diversify the military, diversify the intelligence community, diversify the business community, and certainly to the extent we've seen in government, diversify the federal government, where we have a black, at one point, a black president, a black head of the FBI, and a black attorney general, all increasing the bounty on Assad Shakur, all increasing the delivery of white phosphorus upon Palestinians. All, and now we have a black Lloyd Austin, Secretary of Defense, formerly of Raytheon, coming into the scene, carrying this message of U.S. and Western imperialism and Israeli Zionist imperialism onto Palestinian people. We've already seen histories of the State Department consciously using jazz, and under Hillary Clinton's leadership, using rap and hip hop to promote to the world a false image of inclusivity and affinity for blackness and formerly enslaved people, all to promote U.S. agendas and imperialism around the world. All of that and more that I'm leaving out have left us in this situation where, of course, it's going to be harder to discern between what should be a vociferous, loud, black resistance to U.S. and Israeli aggression in the Middle East, connecting it, as Dr. King and Malcolm and others had done for decades before us, to the oppression we suffer here. But instead, we get much of the opposite. We get black voices, a black female vice president encouraging us to increase our support for Israel, in the same way we're supposed to increase our support for Ukraine, in the same way we're supposed to increase our support for the aggressive dictatorial leadership that is supported in Central and South America by the United States. And of course, we're then meant to condemn any manner of uprising that isn't sanctioned as some sort of color revolution by the State Department, and may take the form, as we've seen, from Hamas. Again, a democratically elected leadership that has seen no other recourse but to respond in this way, because even after democratic elections, even after peace treaties and this treaty and that treaty and this agreement, that agreement, Israel remains in control of the very lived experience of every Palestinian. And they're demonstrating it by cutting off water, internet, healthcare, food, and bombing people in who are defenseless and have no path to leave or to flee that isn't being encouraged by Israel and Egypt at this point, as far as I'm aware. So it's a horrific situation, and voices like ours that might represent a sort of, again, radical black solidarity with Palestine and others is suppressed, marginalized, and to your point, fired, literally fired. My comrades Jackie and Sean at Sputnik Radio, literally
Yeah,
fired.
that's what I was thinking of. That's what I was thinking of. Just gone.
So, and then we know even within some so-called left spaces and left media, if people aren't fired, they are suppressed, marginalized, omitted, reduced in their involvement, all for not quote unquote reporting both sides. But as Amiri Baraka said, I'm sorry to add one more thing, as Amiri Baraka once said, both the slave and the slave master cannot be right.
No, absolutely. And there's some things that people thought they would never see that they have seen, right? And that doesn't mean systems of oppression and systems of violence don't transmute themselves, don't transform themselves, and to still get some of what they were getting before the change. But someone was asking me, do you think that this is it, and that they're just going to eliminate the 2.1 million Palestinians in Gaza? And I was like, no. Now, I still believe that none of them can stop the time. But I do understand, as you've pointed out, that there's a tremendous pulling together of forces to get us to this point where we can be witnessing, where what is happening can be happening. It makes it painful if you pay tax. I was just knowing that alone. I mean, it's a lot of reasons to make it painful, but that alone is painful in terms of no tax dollars are going towards murdering folks all over this planet, and particularly in Palestine. And so, I think that this is something that we are need to have more voices in. And how do we do that? I mean, I know you have your platform, the I Mix What I Like podcast, and Black Power Media, and I know we have this show here. We've got our sister Tanasis with Shimarenga with Root Work. We have the different people that are doing their pieces, as long as they allow us to keep a mic in our hand. Um, and but how do we do more, right? I have all these younger folks, and some of them straight up young that we're working with Baji, and I'm just trying to get them as much stuff as we possibly can. But that's 20 people, right? But how do we get more of this out so that we're at least doing our part? It just takes one leg sweep to take down even the largest of opponents.
So my answers to these kinds of questions are always horrible. But I will, in this case, refer back to what the Palestinian youth movement has recently produced in their what they're calling a bulletin, in a statement that I think people should find and read. I'm getting it from the First Week, the New Inquiry website, the newinquiry.com. But the Palestinian youth movement a few days ago released a statement, and what they've encouraged is that one part I'll just read here says, "We hope this bulletin will help guide what principled solidarity can look like right now within the imperial core, and arm those in solidarity with us with tools to resist the military industrial complex that is hell-bent on our people's extermination. Your priority," they write, "must be communicating a set of realities clearly and unequivocally." And then they go through some of those realities that they're saying that we should participate, those of us inside the imperial core as we are here in the United States, to report at least as best we can what is actually happening from the perspective of Palestinians. 2.4 million are currently being held hostage by Zionists who are martyring thousands with genocidal impunity, they write. All crossings are closed. The Zionists are indiscriminately using bombs and internationally prohibited weapons on a densely populated concentration camp full of entrapped civilians, they write. There is no water or electricity. Mass arrests of Palestinians across all of historic Palestine add to the hundreds of administrative detainees imprisoned without charge, who are now suffering additional retribution by the colonial regime. Gazan hospitals, which are already graveyards, are themselves being targeted, and at least 13 have already been hit. 7 confirmed members of the press have been martyred, and the news stations are regularly being cut due to the lack of electricity. Ambulances and the Red Crescent are also being deliberately targeted. Universities and mosques have been destroyed. Entire families are being wiped out. At least 45 entire families that we have seen reported. And this is just a small sampling of what is happening in Gaza right now. So one thing we can be doing is reporting this, sharing these realities from the perspective of Palestinians. The other is, of course, encouraging that we be organizing and joining organizations and building with people offline to figure out what best we can do to work within empire to weaken the capability of this country to oppress people internally and support the oppression of people externally. And those solutions, as great as any radio or media program can be, they're not going to come here. Those solutions only come in spaces where organized, committed members of radical formations build, discuss, teach, and learn offline, off camera, and off mic. So that's really what I think is best to encourage in these times.
Thank you so much, Jared. I really, really enjoyed this conversation. I hate to bring it to an end, but we'll have you back on. We will have you back on. We're going to do more of this on a variety of topics because there's a lot, as you've pointed out, even in this conversation, that needs to be tackled, discussed, and put out there for folks to be able to to reflect on, but also to add to, especially in terms of that organizing that you've described. How do folks reach you? How do folks follow you? How do folks hear more from you?
I mix what I like, which is an honorific to Steve Biko, and I write what I like. But I mix what I like, and at I mix what I like is where you can find me. I mixwhatilike.org. But of course, I do want, as you mentioned, want to encourage people to check out our collective at blackpowermedia.org and on YouTube, where you have my show and a collective of shows that are trying to make best use of these social media spaces by uh, uniting our voices and trying to create uh, a new public sphere, a Black radical public sphere. But it's been an honor. I thank you very much for the time, and I look forward to building again at some point. So thank you again.
Thank you so very much. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Likewise, you too.
If you've missed any part of this hour, from 10 this morning for 90 days after that, just go to kpfk.org, scroll down to archives, and click on Conversations on the Way. You'll be able to listen to our show in its entirety. Follow me at Attorney Nana on Twitter and Instagram, and subscribe to my YouTube channel to hear the full interviews.